The thundering of hooves against the hard-packed earth was the only warning before Fiona Caldwell came tearing through the valley, her copper hair whipping behind her like flames caught in a prairie wind. The year was 1879, and in this corner of Utah territory, a woman riding astride was enough to earn scorn, but Fiona had given up caring about the opinions of others long ago. Or at least, that's what she told herself as she urged her Palomino mare faster, trying to outrun the words still ringing in her ears. No daughter of mine will bring such shame upon this family. Her father's voice had boomed through their modest home on the outskirts of Park City. Your mother and I have tolerated your eccentricities for far too long. It ends now, or you end your place in this household. Fiona slowed her horse as they approached the creek that cut through the valley floor. She hadn't planned to leave, not permanently. But the finality in her father's tone as he discovered her latest transgression had made it clear. There was no place for her beneath that roof anymore. At 22, Fiona was considered well past the age for marriage in their small mining community. Most girls were wed by 17 or 18, already caring for children and husbands. But Fiona's interests had always pulled her elsewhere, to books about medicine and science, to riding and hunting instead of sewing and cooking, to wearing trousers beneath her skirts for practicality. Just a short rest, she murmured to her horse Penny as she dismounted. The animal nickered softly, nuzzling Fiona's hand in search of treats. Sorry, girl. I left in such a hurry I didn't bring anything for either of us. The realization hit her suddenly. She had nothing but the clothes on her back, a few coins in her pocket, and her father's hunting knife strapped to her belt. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. So much for planning. This wasn't the first time she'd stormed off after an argument, but it was the first time her father had issued such an ultimatum. You're either a proper lady or you're not my daughter. Make your choice. She had made it, she supposed, by turning and walking out without another word. The sun was beginning its westward descent, casting long shadows across the land. Park City was nestled in the mountains, a bustling silver mining town that had sprung up seemingly overnight when the precious metal was discovered. Her father had moved their family there when Fiona was just 12, abandoning their struggling farm for the promise of wealth beneath the earth. Fiona had hated it at first, the noise, the crowds, the soot that seemed to cover everything. But she'd grown to appreciate certain aspects of town life. The occasional traveling lecturer who brought news of scientific discoveries, the small library maintained by the schoolteacher, the diverse people who passed through. None of that would matter now. She couldn't go back. Not after what had happened. It had started innocently enough. The miners' children had been falling ill with a mysterious ailment. Dr. Hopkins, the town's only physician, had been overwhelmed. Fiona, who had read every medical text she could get her hands on, had started helping first by simply bringing food to the affected families. Then by suggesting herbal remedies she'd learned from an old book, and from the Ute woman who occasionally came to town to trade. Her father had disapproved but tolerated her involvement until yesterday, when she'd set a young boy's broken arm while Dr. Hopkins was tending to a mining accident. Word had spread quickly in the small town. Some praised her quick thinking. Others whispered about a woman overstepping her bounds, practicing medicine without training or authority. The final straw had come this morning when the Reverend Jenkins had stopped by to express his concerns about Fiona's behavior, suggesting that such unnatural interests in a young woman might be the work of darker influences. Her father, always mindful of his standing in the community, had been livid. "What am I going to do now, Penny?" Fiona whispered, resting her forehead against her horse's warm neck. The sound of a twig snapping made her whirl around, her hand instinctively going to the knife at her belt. "Easy there, miss. I don't mean you no harm." The man who emerged from the trees was tall and broad-shouldered, his face partly shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. He wore the practical clothing of a working man: denim trousers, a faded blue shirt, and a leather vest weathered by sun and use. A gun belt was slung low on his hips, but his hands were raised slightly, showing he wasn't reaching for his weapon. "You're trespassing on private land," he said, though his tone held curiosity rather than anger. Fiona straightened, keeping one hand on Penny's reins. "I apologize. I didn't realize. I'll be on my way." As she moved to mount her horse, the man stepped closer, and she got her first clear look at his face. He was younger than she'd initially thought, perhaps in his late 20s, with a square jaw shadowed by stubble and eyes the color of the sky after a storm. There was something in those eyes that gave her pause a kindness that seemed at odds with his rugged appearance. "Are you in some kind of trouble, miss?" he asked. "It's getting late to be out riding alone." "No trouble," Fiona replied automatically, then reconsidered. "Well, no immediate danger, at least." The corner of his mouth quirked upward. "That's a careful answer." Fiona found herself returning his slight smile. "I find care is needed when speaking to armed strangers in the wilderness." He chuckled at that, a warm sound that somehow eased the tension in her shoulders. "Owen Quincy," he said, touching the brim of his hat in greeting. "I manage the Twin Pines Ranch for Mr. Henderson, and you are—" Fiona hesitated only briefly. "Fiona Caldwell." Recognition flickered in his eyes. "Caldwell? You're James Caldwell's daughter, the assayer from Park City," she stiffened. "I was. I'm not sure what I am now." Owen studied her for a moment, noting the tension in her posture and the determined set of her jaw. His gaze flicked to her horse, the small saddlebag, and back to her face. "Heading somewhere specific?" he asked. "Away," she answered honestly. Owen nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Well, Miss Caldwell, the way you're heading toward leads to pretty rough country if you don't know it well. There's a storm brewing in those mountains," he gestured to the peaks in the distance, "and night's coming on fast." As if to punctuate his words, a cool gust of wind swept through the valley, carrying the unmistakable scent of rain. Fiona glanced at the darkening sky and tried to quell the flutter of uncertainty in her stomach. She'd been so intent on getting away that she hadn't planned beyond this moment. "I appreciate the warning, Mr. Quincy, but I'll manage," she said with more confidence than she felt. "I've no doubt you would under better circumstances," he replied, surprising her with his lack of condescension. "But I wouldn't be much of a gentleman if I let a lady ride into a storm without offering shelter. The ranch house is about 2 miles east. You're welcome to wait out the weather there." Fiona weighed her options. Pride urged her to refuse, to prove she could take care of herself. But practicality, something her unconventional interests had taught her to value, suggested that accepting his offer was the wiser choice. "Very well," she conceded. "Thank you for your hospitality." Owen's smile returned, more fully this time. "My horse is just over the ridge. We can ride together." As they traveled side by side, the first heavy drops of rain began to fall. By the time the ranch house came into view, a substantial log structure with a wide porch and smoke curling from the chimney, they were both soaked through. "Hannah," Owen called as they dismounted beneath the overhang of the barn. "We've got company." A petite woman with graying hair appeared at the barn door, her expression moving quickly from curiosity to concern as she took in Fiona's bedraggled appearance. "Goodness, child, you're drenched. Come inside before you catch your death." Before Fiona could protest, she found herself ushered into the warm kitchen of the ranch house, a towel thrust into her hands and a steaming mug of coffee placed in front of her. "Hannah Montgomery runs the household," Owen explained as he hung his wet hat on a peg by the door. "Hannah, this is Miss Fiona Caldwell from Park City." The older woman's eyes widened slightly. "Caldwell, James Caldwell's daughter." Fiona nodded warily, wondering what gossip might have reached even this isolated ranch. "I met your mother once," Hannah said. "A fine lady. She was kind to me when I was new in town and lost my way." The unexpected mention of her mother brought a lump to Fiona's throat. Catherine Caldwell had been a gentle soul who had tried to temper her husband's rigid expectations and protect her headstrong daughter. Her death from influenza 3 years ago had left a void that seemed to widen the gap between Fiona and her father. "She was kind to everyone," Fiona said softly. An awkward silence fell, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the rhythmic drumming of rain on the roof. "Miss Caldwell will be staying the night," Owen announced. "The storm's set in and it's too dangerous to travel." Hannah nodded briskly. "I'll prepare the spare room. There's stew keeping warm on the stove if you're hungry." She bustled from the room, leaving Fiona alone with Owen. "Your circumstances must be pressing to have you riding out with no provisions and a storm approaching," Owen observed, pouring himself a cup of coffee and taking the seat across from her at the kitchen table. Fiona wrapped her hands around her mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "It was a hasty departure." "Family trouble?" he asked. She looked up sharply. "What makes you say that?" Owen shrugged. "You said you were James Caldwell's daughter, but you're not sure what you are now. That speaks to a rift." His perceptiveness surprised her. "My father and I have different ideas about what a woman's place should be." "And what do you believe a woman's place is?" he asked, his tone genuinely curious rather than challenging. Fiona met his gaze steadily. "Wherever her abilities and interests lead her." A slow smile spread across Owen's face. "My mother would have liked you. She ran this ranch alongside my father for 20 years. Could outride, outshoot, and outthink most men in the territory." "And what happened to her?" Fiona asked. A shadow passed over his features. "Cholera took both my parents 5 years ago. I was working as a ranch hand in Wyoming when word reached me. Came back to help settle their affairs and never left. Mr. Henderson owns the property now, but he's an absentee landlord who trusts me to run things." "I'm sorry for your loss," Fiona said sincerely. "Thank you." Owen rose from the table and moved to the stove, returning with 2 bowls of fragrant stew. "Eat. Hannah's cooking is the best cure for a difficult day that I know of." They ate in companionable silence, the stew warming Fiona from the inside out. The storm raged outside, lightning occasionally illuminating the kitchen through the windows, followed by the deep rumble of thunder. Fiona found herself strangely at ease in this stranger's home, more comfortable than she had felt in her own for some time. "Tomorrow," Owen said as he collected their empty bowls, "we can figure out where you're headed and how to get you there safely." "I don't know where I'm headed," Fiona admitted. "I just knew I couldn't stay." Owen regarded her thoughtfully. "Everyone needs somewhere to belong, Miss Caldwell. Please call me Fiona. I think we're past formalities after you rescued me from a storm." "Fiona, then," he agreed, her name sounding different in his deep voice. "And I'm Owen." Hannah reappeared, announcing that the spare room was ready. As Fiona followed her up the narrow staircase, she glanced back to find Owen watching her, an unreadable expression on his face. That night, as rain pelted against the window of the small but comfortable bedroom, Fiona lay awake, listening to the storm and wondering what tomorrow would bring. For the first time in her life, she had no plan, no direction, only the certainty that she could not go back to being the person her father wanted her to be, Morning dawned clear and bright, the storm having washed the world clean. Fiona woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her stomach reminding her that she'd eaten little in the past day. Her clothes had been washed and dried overnight and laid neatly across the chair in her room. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs. The kitchen was empty save for Hannah, who was tending to biscuits in the oven. "Good morning, dear," the older woman greeted her. "Sleep well, better than I expected," Fiona answered truthfully. "Thank you for the clean clothes." Hannah waved away her thanks. "Sit and eat." Owen's been out since dawn checking on the cattle after the storm, but he should be back soon. As if summoned by his name, the door swung open and Owen entered, bringing with him the scent of fresh air and horses. He removed his hat, running a hand through his dark hair, slightly damp with sweat. "Morning, ladies," he said, his eyes finding Fiona's across the room. "How are you feeling today?" "Much better, thank you," she replied, suddenly aware of how domestic this scene must appear, like they were a family sitting down to breakfast together. Owen joined them at the table, and conversation flowed easily as they ate. Hannah inquired about Fiona's interests, and to her surprise, neither Hannah nor Owen seemed shocked or disapproving when she spoke of her fascination with medicine and science. "My grandfather was a doctor back east," Owen commented. "Left me his medical books when he passed. They're gathering dust in the study since I've little head for such things." Fiona's eyes lit up. "Really? What sort of books? I'll show you after breakfast if you like," he offered. True to his word, once the meal was cleared away, Owen led Fiona to a small room off the main living area. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with volumes that made her heart beat faster. She moved immediately to examine them, fingers tracing the spines of texts she'd only dreamed of reading. "These are wonderful," she breathed. "Gray's Anatomy, Erichsen's Science and Art of Surgery, even Florence Nightingale's Notes on Nursing." Owen watched her with evident amusement. "You can borrow whatever interests you." Fiona turned to him in surprise. "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose, and besides, I don't even know where I'll be staying." A thoughtful expression crossed Owen's face. "Actually, I might have a proposition for you." "A proposition?" Fiona repeated cautiously. "Hannah's getting on in years, though she'd never admit it," he explained. "And there's more work around here than the two of us can manage. With the herd expanding and calving season approaching, we could use another pair of hands." Fiona stared at him. "Are you offering me a job?" "Room, board, and fair wages," Owen confirmed. "If you're willing to help with the household and occasionally with the ranch work. Nothing improper," he added hastily. "Hannah would be here as chaperone." "You don't even know me," Fiona pointed out. "I could be running from the law for all you know," Owen laughed. "Are you?" "No, of course not." "Then what do you say? It would give you time to figure out your next steps without having to rush into anything." Fiona hesitated. The offer was tempting, a respite, a chance to breathe and plan. "And those books," but something still bothered her. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" she asked. Owen's expression grew more serious. "Because someone did the same for me once when I needed it most, and because—" He paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "I recognize something in you. A spirit that shouldn't be broken." Their eyes met, and for a moment Fiona felt as if he could see straight through to her core, to the determination and dreams that her father had tried so hard to extinguish. "I accept," she said finally. "Thank you." Owen's smile returned. "Good. Now let's find you some proper ranch clothes. Those fine town dresses won't last a day out here." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. True to his word, Owen provided Fiona with practical clothing, men's trousers and shirts that Hannah altered to fit her more slender frame. Fiona threw herself into the work, eager to prove her worth and distract herself from thoughts of home. She rose before dawn each day, helping Hannah prepare breakfast for the small crew of ranch hands who lived in the bunkhouse. After the men rode out, she turned to household tasks: cooking, cleaning, mending. In the afternoons, Owen often invited her to join him for various ranch activities, teaching her to mend fences, check irrigation ditches, and even assist with the less dangerous aspects of cattle management. To her surprise, Fiona found she enjoyed the physical labor. There was a satisfaction in tangible work that left her pleasantly tired at day's end. And each night, she would retire to the study with one of Owen's grandfather's books, absorbing knowledge that further fueled her passion for medicine. Owen, she discovered, was a patient teacher and an engaging companion. His quiet confidence never veered into arrogance, and he treated her as an equal, valuing her opinions and abilities. They fell into easy conversations during their shared tasks, discussing everything from cattle breeding techniques to literature, to the changing landscape of the West. "My father would be horrified to see me now," Fiona remarked one afternoon as they rode back to the ranch house after checking on a pregnant heifer. She was streaked with dirt, her hair escaping its braid, wearing men's clothing and riding astride. Owen glanced over at her. "Is that why he and you quarreled? Because you prefer practical clothing and activities?" Fiona sighed. "Partly. But it goes deeper than that. He believes a woman's only purpose is to be a wife and mother. My interests in medicine and science, he calls them unnatural, says they'll lead me to ruin." "And what do you think?" Owen asked. "I think knowledge is never wasted," she replied firmly. "I think helping others is a calling that shouldn't be limited by one's sex, and I think—" She hesitated, then continued with quiet conviction. "I think I was born different, and no amount of my father's disapproval will change that." Owen was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but certain. "Different is beautiful to me." The simple statement, delivered without fanfare, struck Fiona with unexpected force. She turned to look at him, but he had already urged his horse ahead, leaving her to ponder his words alone. That evening, as Fiona helped Hannah prepare dinner, the older woman broke their companionable silence with an observation. "He watches you, you know." Fiona nearly dropped the potato she was peeling. "I beg your pardon." Hannah's knowing smile crinkled the corners of her eyes. "Owen. When you're not looking, his eyes follow you. I haven't seen him look at anyone that way since Mary Jenkins broke his heart 5 years ago." Heat rose in Fiona's cheeks. "I'm sure you're mistaken. He's simply being kind, offering employment to someone in need." "Is that what you think this is?" Hannah asked, gesturing around the kitchen. "Employment? Child, I've worked for the Quincy family for nearly 30 years. I know the difference between hiring help and whatever this is." "I don't know what you mean," Fiona insisted, though a flutter of something anticipation. "Hope." Stirred in her chest. Hannah just shook her head, returning to the stew she was stirring. "You young folks always think you have all the time in the world to figure things out. Just remember, life has a way of taking unexpected turns." Before Fiona could respond, the kitchen door swung open and Owen entered, bringing with him the scent of horses and leather. His eyes found hers immediately, warming in a way that suddenly seemed significant in light of Hannah's words. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing her flushed face. "Fine," Fiona said quickly. "Just the heat from the stove." If Owen doubted her explanation, he didn't show it. Instead, he moved to the wash basin to clean up for dinner, rolling up his sleeves to reveal forearms tanned and muscled from years of outdoor work. Fiona found herself watching the movement of his hands, strong and capable, and quickly looked away when he glanced in her direction. Hannah's soft chuckle was audible only to Fiona, who shot the older woman a warning look. Hannah merely winked in response. Dinner that night seemed charged with a new awareness, at least on Fiona's part. Every accidental brush of hands as dishes were passed, every shared glance or smile, took on new meaning. She found herself noticing details about Owen she had overlooked before: the tiny scar at the corner of his left eyebrow, the way one side of his mouth lifted higher than the other when he smiled, the deep timbre of his laugh. After the meal, as was their custom, Owen and Fiona retreated to the study while Hannah retired to her room. Usually, this time was spent with Fiona reading while Owen caught up on the ranch accounts, but tonight, a tension hummed between them that made it difficult for Fiona to concentrate on the medical text in her lap. "You're not rating," Owen observed after several minutes of silence. Fiona looked up to find him watching her, his ledger book closed on the desk before him. "I'm distracted tonight," she admitted. "By what?" She hesitated, unsure how to articulate the shift in her perceptions. "By possibilities," she said finally. Owen's expression grew thoughtful. "What sort of possibilities?" "The future," Fiona said. "What comes next? I can't stay here forever, living on your charity." "Is that what you think this is?" he asked, echoing Hannah's earlier question with such similarity that Fiona wondered if they had discussed her. "What would you call it?" She countered. Owen rose from his desk and moved to sit beside her on the small sofa. The proximity sent her pulse racing in a way that both alarmed and exhilarated her. "I'd call it the best decision I've made in years," he said quietly. "Having you here, it's brought life back to this place." "To me." Fiona swallowed hard, her throat suddenly dry. "Owen, you don't have to say anything," he assured her. "I know you're still finding your path, but I want you to know that whatever you decide, wherever that path leads, I would." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I would like to walk it with you if you'll allow it." The sincerity in his eyes left no doubt about his meaning. This was no casual offer of continued employment or friendship. This was something far more profound. "We've known each other such a short time," Fiona whispered, though her heart was already answering his unspoken question with a resounding yes. Owen smiled, that slightly crooked smile that she had come to cherish. "Some things don't need time, Fiona. They just need recognition." He reached out slowly, giving her ample opportunity to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, almost reverent, and Fiona found herself leaning into it. "You see me," she said, the realization dawning as she spoke the words. "Not who you think I should be, or who society says I am, just me." "From the first moment," Owen confirmed. "A woman riding like the wind, knife at her belt, determination in every line of her body. How could I see anything else?" The tenderness in his voice broke something open inside Fiona, a wall she hadn't even realized she'd built. Tears sprang to her eyes, not of sadness but of profound relief. To be seen, truly seen, and still valued, it was a gift she had never expected to receive. Owen's hand cupped her cheek, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped. "May I kiss you?" he asked, his voice a low rumble that she felt more than heard. Fiona nodded, words failing her. His lips met hers with exquisite gentleness, a question rather than a demand. She answered by leaning closer, her hand finding his shoulder for balance as the world seemed to tilt beneath her. The kiss deepened, becoming something that spoke of hunger and hope and possibility. When they finally parted, both breathless, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Fiona Caldwell," he confessed. "I don't expect you to say it back, not yet, but I wanted you to know." Fiona closed her eyes, savoring the weight of his words. "I think," she said slowly, "that I might be halfway there myself." His chuckle vibrated through her. "Only halfway. I'll have to try harder then. She pulled back to look at him, her smile matching his. I should warn you, I'm stubborn and opinionated and entirely too fond of wearing trousers. All qualities I admire, he assured her, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. And I should warn you that I'm set in my ways, work too much, and have been known to argue with cattle as if they understand English. Fiona laughed, the sound bright in the quiet room. We make quite a pair, don't we? I think we could, Owen said, his tone growing serious again. If you want to. Before Fiona could respond, a sharp knock at the front door interrupted them. They pulled apart, startled by the unexpected sound. Visitors were rare at the ranch, especially at this hour. Stay here, Owen said, rising to his feet. His hand instinctively checked the gun at his hip as he moved toward the door. Fiona followed anyway, her curiosity overcoming caution. She hung back in the hallway as Owen opened the door, revealing a figure silhouetted against the night sky. I'm looking for my daughter, came a familiar voice that sent ice through Fiona's veins. I was told in town she might be here. James Caldwell stood on the porch, hat in hand, his tall frame rigid with tension. His eyes, the same green as Fiona's own, found her in the shadows of the hallway. Fiona, he said, his voice a complex mixture of relief and reproach. You need to come home now. Owen's posture stiffened. Mr. Caldwell, it's late. Perhaps this conversation would be better had in the morning after everyone's had some rest. James Caldwell drew himself up, his gaze flicking dismissively over Owen. This is a family matter, young man. I appreciate your hospitality toward my daughter, but she belongs at home with her kin. I'm not going back, Fiona said, stepping forward to stand beside Owen. I made my choice when I left, and you made yours when you gave me that ultimatum. Her father's expression hardened. You're being foolish, Fiona. What future do you imagine for yourself here, living among strangers, working as a servant? Is that what your mother raised you for? The mention of her mother was a calculated blow, and Fiona felt it land, but she stood her ground. Mother taught me to be true to myself. That's what I'm doing. By abandoning your family, by living unchaperoned with a man not related to you, do you have any idea what people are saying in town? Owen spoke before Fiona could respond. Sir, with all due respect, your daughter has been properly chaperoned by Mrs. Montgomery, who has lived on this ranch for decades. Her reputation is intact, and her work here has been invaluable. James Caldwell barely spared Owen a glance. And who might you be to speak on my daughter's behalf? Owen Quincy, sir. I manage Twin Pines Ranch. Well, Mr. Quincy, I don't recall asking for your input on my family's affairs. Fiona, gather your things. We're leaving. Fiona felt a surge of the old familiar anger, hot and clarifying. No, Father, I'm 22 years old. You have no legal authority to command me anymore. While you bear my name, then perhaps I'll change it, Fiona interrupted, her hands balling into fists at her sides. You made yourself very clear the day I left. I'm either a proper lady by your definition, or I'm not your daughter. I chose the latter. A heavy silence fell. James Caldwell's face had gone pale, his lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, Fiona noticed the deep lines around his eyes, the gray at his temples that seemed more pronounced than when she'd left. Is that truly what you believe? He asked finally, his voice lower. That I've disowned you. You gave me an ultimatum, Fiona reminded him. Be someone I'm not or leave. I left. Her father passed a hand over his face, suddenly looking older than his 50 years. I spoke in anger. I didn't mean for you to disappear for weeks, with no word of whether you were alive or dead. The raw emotion in his voice gave Fiona pause. She hadn't considered how her abrupt departure might have affected him. In her mind, he would have been relieved to be rid of his troublesome daughter. Perhaps, Owen suggested quietly. You might continue this conversation inside, out of the night air. After a moment's hesitation, James Caldwell nodded, stepping over the threshold. Owen guided them to the living room, where the remnants of a fire still glowed in the hearth. He added a log, giving father and daughter a moment of privacy as he busied himself with the flames. "I'll leave you to talk," Owen said when the fire was crackling again. "Mr. Caldwell, there's coffee in the kitchen if you'd like some." As he moved to exit, Fiona caught his hand. "Stay," she said, "please." Owen's eyes searched hers, and whatever he saw there made him nod. He took a seat in a chair near the fireplace, present but giving them space. James Caldwell watched this interaction with narrowed eyes before turning his attention back to his daughter. "You've made quite an impression here, it seems." "I've found a place where my differences are valued, not condemned," Fiona said quietly. Her father winced. "Is that how you felt at home? Condemned?" "Yes," Fiona answered honestly. "Since Mother died especially, nothing I did was right, nothing I was interested in was appropriate. You wanted me to be someone I could never be." James sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "I wanted to protect you. The world is not kind to women who step outside the accepted boundaries, Fiona. I've seen it happen, bright, capable women crushed by society's expectations and judgments." "Like Mother?" Fiona asked softly. A shadow passed over her father's face. "Your mother was exceptional. She had a mind that should have been nurtured with education, with opportunity. Instead, she became a miner's wife, then an assayer's wife, living in frontier towns where her talents were wasted." This was a side of her father Fiona had never seen, reflective, almost regretful. "She never seemed unhappy," she ventured. "She wasn't, not exactly. Catherine found joy in small things in you, in creating beauty wherever she could. But I always wondered what she might have become in a different world. And then I saw you, with all her brilliance and twice her stubbornness, heading down a path that would only bring you pain. So you tried to force me into a mold that would keep me safe," Fiona concluded. "I tried to spare you disappointment," her father corrected. "But in doing so, I caused exactly what I feared most. I lost you." The rawness in his voice touched something in Fiona. For all his faults, her father had acted out of a misguided form of love. It didn't excuse his behavior, but it helped her understand it. "I'm still here, Father," she said gently. "Just not in the way you expected." James Caldwell looked around the room, taking in the comfortable but modest surroundings. "And this is where you want to be, working on a cattle ranch?" Fiona glanced at Owen, who had remained respectfully silent throughout their exchange. "I found something here I never had in Park City," she said. "Acceptance, purpose, the freedom to be myself." Her father's gaze followed hers to Owen, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I see. And you, Mr. Quincy, what are your intentions toward my daughter?" Owen straightened in his chair, meeting the older man's scrutiny without flinching. "My intentions are honorable, sir. I respect Fiona's intelligence, her spirit, and her independence. I would never ask her to be anything other than who she is. And if who she is leads her away from here, to pursue medicine, perhaps, as she's always dreamed." Owen's answer came without hesitation. "Then I would support her journey however I could." Fiona stared at him, heart swelling. They had never discussed her deeper ambitions, yet somehow he knew. And more remarkably, he didn't see them as a threat, but as a part of her to be encouraged. "Father," she said, turning back to James Caldwell, "I'm not coming back to live as I did before. That life is behind me, but—" She hesitated, then continued, "I would like not to lose you entirely. Could we find a middle ground? Could you accept me as I am, even if you don't understand or approve of all my choices?" For a long moment, James Caldwell was silent, his internal struggle visible in the tight lines around his mouth. Finally, he sighed. a sound of surrender rather than disapproval. "You are so like your mother," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "She would be proud of your courage, even if it terrifies me." He looked at Owen again, assessing. "And she would have liked you, young man. Catherine always did appreciate those who could see beyond convention." It wasn't a full blessing, but it was a beginning. Fiona felt a weight lift from her shoulders, not completely gone, but lighter. "Will you stay the night, Father? It's late to be riding back to town." James Caldwell hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you. I would appreciate that." The following morning brought a tentative peace. Over breakfast, prepared by Fiona with Hannah's assistance, conversations remained polite if somewhat strained. James Caldwell observed his daughter moving confidently around the unfamiliar kitchen, handling tasks she had often shirked at home, and something in his expression suggested he was seeing her anew. As he prepared to depart, he pulled Fiona aside on the porch. "I've been thinking about what you said, about finding a middle ground." Fiona nodded, waiting. "Dr. Hopkins mentioned to me before I left that he's been impressed by your knowledge of medical matters. He said several families in town have spoken highly of your assistance during the recent illnesses. This was unexpected." "Dr. Hopkins said that," her father nodded. "He suggested that with proper training you might make a fine nurse or midwife. There's a school in Denver that accepts women for such education." Fiona's heart leapt. "Are you saying you would support such a path?" "I'm saying I'm trying to understand the daughter I have, rather than clinging to the one I imagined." James Caldwell's voice was gruff but sincere. "It won't happen overnight, Fiona. I'm an old dog learning new tricks, but I don't want to lose you completely." Impulsively, Fiona hugged him, something she hadn't done in years. After a startled moment, her father's arms came around her, returning the embrace with awkward tenderness. "Thank you," she whispered against his shoulder. As they pulled apart, Owen appeared in the doorway, tactfully giving them space while still making his presence known. "Mr. Quincy," James Caldwell acknowledged with a nod. "I trust you'll continue to treat my daughter with the respect she deserves." "Yes, sir," Owen replied solemnly. "You have my word." With a final nod to them both, James Caldwell mounted his horse and began the journey back to Park City, leaving Fiona and Owen standing side by side on the porch. "Are you all right?" Owen asked once her father was out of sight. Fiona turned to him, a mixture of emotions swirling within her. "I think so. It's not fixed, but it's a start." Owen reached for her hand, entwining their fingers. "He loves you in his own flawed way." "Yes," Fiona agreed. "And I love him, which makes it all the more complicated." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the dust settle on the road. "Did you mean what you said?" Fiona asked suddenly. "About supporting me if I wanted to pursue medicine?" Owen's smile was warm and genuine. "Every word. Your mind is too extraordinary to be limited by arbitrary boundaries. Whether that means studying in Denver or finding an apprenticeship closer to home, I want to see you fulfill that potential." "And us?" she asked, the question that had been hovering between them finally taking shape. "What would that mean for us?" Owen turned to face her fully, his blue eyes serious. "It would mean building a life together that honors who we both are. It might not be conventional, but then again, neither are we." The truth of his words resonated within Fiona. They weren't conventional, a woman with medical aspirations, a rancher with a philosopher's heart. Perhaps that was precisely why they fit so well together. "I'm not ready to make any grand decisions today," she told him honestly. "But I know that whatever path I choose, I want you beside me on it." Owen lifted their joined hands to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "Then that's where I'll be, for as long as you'll have me." The weeks that followed brought a gradual transformation to Fiona's life at Twin Pines Ranch. Her relationship with Owen deepened, each day revealing new facets of the man who had opened his home and heart to her. They worked side by side during daylight hours and spent evenings in the study, reading or simply talking about the future they were beginning to envision together. James Caldwell made good on his tentative promise, sending a letter of introduction to the nursing school in Denver, along with information about their admissions process. The accompanying note to Fiona was brief but meaningful. "Your mother always said you were destined for important work." Perhaps this is the beginning of that journey. Fiona was touched by the gesture, though still uncertain about leaving Twin Pines, leaving Owen to pursue her studies. The school required a 2-year commitment, a significant separation for a relationship still in its early stages. "What if everything changes while I'm gone?" she asked Owen one evening as they sat on the porch swing, watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and crimson. "Some things will change," he acknowledged, his arm a comforting weight around her shoulders. "That's the nature of life." "But what matters most between us that won't?" "How can you be so sure?" Fiona pressed. "We've known each other such a short time." Owen was quiet for a moment, his gaze on the distant horizon. "My father once told me that love isn't about certainty, it's about faith. Faith in yourself, faith in the other person, and faith in what you're building together." He turned to look at her, his eyes reflecting the last rays of sunlight. "I have faith in us, Fiona. Do you?" The simplicity of the question belied its depth. Fiona considered all that had happened since that fateful day she'd ridden away from Park City, how a chance encounter had led to a home, a purpose, and a love she hadn't known was possible. "I do," she realized, the words feeling like a vow. "I have faith in us." Owen's smile was tender as he leaned in to kiss her, a gentle affirmation of promises not yet spoken but understood nonetheless. The next morning brought an unexpected visitor to Twin Pines. Dr. Hopkins, the physician from Park City, arrived just as Fiona was hanging laundry in the yard. His buggy kicked up dust as it came to a stop near the barn, and Fiona shaded her eyes against the sun, surprised to recognize the elderly doctor. "Miss Caldwell," he called, climbing down with the stiffness of a man who had spent too many hours in a hard seat. "I hoped I might find you here, Doctor." "Hopkins," Fiona greeted him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Is everything all right?" "Is my father, your father is fine," the doctor assured her. "In fact, it was he who suggested I might pay you a visit. Is there somewhere we might talk?" Curious, Fiona led him to the kitchen, where Hannah was kneading bread dough. After introductions and the requisite offering of coffee, Hannah tactfully excused herself, leaving Fiona alone with the doctor. "I'll be direct, Miss Caldwell," Dr. Hopkins said, settling into a chair at the table. "I find myself in need of assistance. The mining accidents have increased with the new shaft at the Silver King, and the usual winter ailments are beginning to appear as well. I'm not as young as I once was, and my hands aren't as steady." Fiona listened, uncertain where this was leading. "Your father mentioned that you have an interest in medical matters," the doctor continued. "And I recall your quick thinking with the Miller boy's broken arm. I wondered if you might consider a position as my assistant." Fiona stared at him, momentarily speechless. "Your assistant?" "But I have no formal training." Dr. Hopkins waved a hand dismissively. "Training can be acquired. What cannot be taught is instinct, compassion, and a natural aptitude, all of which you possess. I would teach you what I know, and in exchange you would help with patients, preparation of medicines, record keeping, and the like." "But—" Fiona hesitated, her mind racing. "I'm a woman, wouldn't that be unconventional?" The doctor's laugh was a dry wheeze. "My dear, I practiced medicine on the Oregon Trail and in mining camps where the only anesthetic was whiskey. Conventional has never been a particular concern of mine. What matters is capability, and from what I've observed and heard, you have that in abundance. This is unexpected, Fiona said honestly. Take some time to consider it, Dr. Hopkins advised. It would not be an easy position, long hours, difficult conditions, modest pay, but it would provide practical experience that no school could match. And he added with a knowing look, it would allow you to remain in the area, which I suspect holds some appeal. Fiona felt heat rise in her cheeks, wondering just how much her father had shared about her situation. I'll need to discuss this with the people here, Dr. Hopkins nodded, rising from his seat. Of course. I'll be returning to town this afternoon. Send word when you've reached a decision. After the doctor departed, Fiona sought out Owen, finding him in the corral breaking a young horse. She waited until he had finished the session, admiring the patient way he worked with the nervous animal before approaching. You have a visitor earlier, Owen observed as he secured the corral gate. Trouble? No, actually, it might be an opportunity. Fiona explained Dr. Hopkins's offer, watching Owen's expression carefully. When she finished, Owen leaned against the fence post, considering. What do you think? Is it what you want? I'm not sure, Fiona admitted. It's not the formal education the Denver school would provide. But it would be real, practical experience. And she hesitated, then continued honestly, it would mean not having to leave here, not having to leave you. Owen pushed away from the fence, closing the distance between them. Fiona, I want you to make this decision based on what's best for your future, not out of concern for our relationship. If Denver is where you need to go to fulfill your potential, then that's where you should be. His selflessness touched her deeply. And if I choose to stay, then I would be overjoyed, he said simply, but only if it's truly what you want. Fiona considered the question carefully. The Denver school offered prestige, a structured curriculum, and a recognized certificate upon completion. Dr. Hopkins offered hands-on experience, immediate engagement with patients, and the chance to learn medicine as it was actually practiced in their remote corner of the territory. I think, she said slowly, that there's more than one path to the same destination. The school would give me credentials, but Dr. Hopkins would give me skills I might not learn in a classroom. Owen nodded, understanding in his eyes. And your father, would he support this alternative? He's the one who sent Dr. Hopkins to me, Fiona pointed out. I think he's trying in his way to find that middle ground we discussed. Then it seems you have a decision to make, Owen said. Just know that whatever you choose, I'm with you. Fiona spent the evening weighing her options, discussing the matter with both Owen and Hannah. By morning, her path was clear. She would accept Dr. Hopkins's offer, commuting between Park City and Twin Pines as needed for her duties. The arrangement proved more challenging than anticipated. Park City was a good hour's ride from the ranch, and winter was approaching, promising snow that would make the journey more difficult. After several weeks of exhausting travel between the two locations, Owen proposed a solution. We should get married, he said one evening as they sat by the fire after a particularly grueling day for Fiona. She looked up from the medical text she'd been studying, certain she had misheard. I beg your pardon. Owen set aside the ranch ledger he'd been reviewing and moved to kneel before her chair. I had planned something more romantic, he admitted with a rueful smile. But watching you push yourself to exhaustion day after day has accelerated my timeline. Marry me, Fiona. Be my wife, my partner in all things. Owen. Fiona's heart raced, joy mingling with practical concerns. Is this just about making my work with Dr. Hopkins more convenient? He shook his head, taking her hands in his. No, it's about wanting to build a life with you. It's about loving your mind, your spirit, your determination. It's about knowing with absolute certainty that you are the woman I want beside me for all the days I have left on this earth. Tears pricked at Fiona's eyes. Even though I'm different, even though I may never be the traditional wife most men expect, different is beautiful to me. Owen repeated the words he'd spoken months before, this time with even greater conviction. I don't want a traditional wife. I want you, Fiona Caldwell, exactly as you are. Fiona launched herself from the chair into his arms, nearly toppling them both onto the rug. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. Their wedding took place on a crisp December day in 1879, with snow dusting the mountains surrounding Twin Pines Ranch. The ceremony was small but meaningful, held in the ranch's main room, decorated with pine boughs and winter berries by Hannah's skilled hands. James Caldwell walked his daughter down the makeshift aisle, his expression a complex mixture of pride and lingering uncertainty. But when he placed Fiona's hand in Owen's, his words were clear and sincere. Take care of each other. That's all that truly matters in this life. Dr. Hopkins served as witness, along with Hannah and several of the ranch hands who had come to respect both Owen and Fiona over the preceding months. The local minister, initially hesitant about Fiona's unconventional reputation, had been won over by Owen's unwavering support of his bride-to-be and the obvious love between them. Fiona wore a simple gown of deep blue velvet, not the traditional white, but a color that brought out the green of her eyes and complemented the copper of her hair. At her throat rested her mother's cameo, a tangible connection to the woman who had always encouraged her to follow her heart. As they exchanged vows, promising to honor, cherish, and support each other through all of life's joys and challenges, Fiona felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This was not the future she had imagined for herself, but it was, she realized, the one she would have chosen had she known it was possible, a marriage of equals, built on mutual respect and genuine love. The months that followed were a time of adjustment and growth for the newlyweds. Fiona continued her apprenticeship with Dr. Hopkins, now staying in town for several days each week in a small room behind his office. The arrangement allowed her to fully immerse herself in medical work without the exhausting daily travel, while still spending long weekends at the ranch with Owen. For his part, Owen supported her ambitions wholeheartedly, often riding into town himself to escort her home on Fridays, eager to hear about her week's experiences. He took genuine interest in her medical studies, sometimes reading aloud to her from textbooks when her eyes were too tired to focus after a long day. Spring brought new life to Twin Pines Ranch, calves in the pastures, wildflowers on the hillsides, and the news that Fiona was expecting their first child. The discovery was met with joy tempered by practical considerations. Will you continue your work with Dr. Hopkins? Owen asked as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting gently on her still flat stomach. For as long as I can, Fiona replied. And afterward? Well, I've been thinking about that. Park City needs a midwife. Dr. Hopkins is skilled, but many women would prefer a female attendant for such matters. Owen propped himself up on one elbow, looking down at her with interest. You would focus your practice on women and children, Fiona nodded. It seems a natural progression, and it would allow for more predictable hours once the baby arrives. She paused, watching his face carefully. What do you think? I think you'll be excellent at it, Owen said without hesitation. And I think our child will grow up seeing that a woman can be both a loving mother and a respected professional. His unwavering support brought tears to Fiona's eyes. Pregnancy had made her more emotional than usual. I love you, she whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. And I love you, Owen replied against her lips. every different, beautiful part of you. Their son, William James Quincy, was born on a warm September evening in 1880, with Dr. Hopkins attending and Hannah providing steady support. The birth was difficult but uncomplicated, and when Owen was finally allowed into the bedroom to meet his son, his face reflected awe and adoration. "He has your hair," he said softly, touching the copper fuzz on the newborn's head. "And your eyes, I think," Fiona replied, exhausted but radiant, "though they may change." Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around his wife, the other hand gently cradling his son's tiny fingers. "Thank you," he whispered against Fiona's temple. "For what?" she asked, leaning into his embrace. "For everything. For being different, for choosing me, for our son, for making my life infinitely richer than I ever dreamed it could be." Fiona turned her face up to his, heart full to bursting with love for this man who had seen her value when others saw only her differences. "Thank you for showing me that being myself wasn't just acceptable, it was beautiful." As William grew from infant to toddler, Fiona gradually resumed her medical work, now focusing primarily on midwifery and children's ailments. Word of her skills spread throughout the county, and soon women were traveling considerable distances to seek her care. Dr. Hopkins, recognizing her gift, gradually ceded more of these cases to her, allowing him to focus on surgical matters and general practice. The balance wasn't always easy to maintain. There were nights when Fiona was called away to attend a difficult birth, leaving Owen to care for their son. There were days when ranch emergencies prevented Owen from taking his turn with William so Fiona could see patients. But together, they made it work, each supporting the other's responsibilities and ambitions. James Caldwell, true to his word, continued working to accept his daughter's unconventional life. He visited regularly, developing a close relationship with his grandson and a grudging respect for his son-in-law. While he never fully understood Fiona's passion for medicine, he came to appreciate the good she did in the community and the happiness she had found. On William's third birthday, as family and friends gathered at Twin Pines to celebrate, Fiona found herself standing on the porch, watching her father push her son on the swing that Owen had built beneath the old oak tree. The sight her past and her future connected by love and laughter brought a lump to her throat. She felt Owen's arms encircle her from behind, his chin resting on top of her head. "Happy," he murmured. "Completely," she answered, leaning back against his solid warmth. "Though I have news that might make us even happier." Owen turned her in his arms, eyes searching her face. "News?" Fiona smiled, taking his hand and placing it over her abdomen. "William will have a brother or sister come spring." Joy bloomed across Owen's features, followed quickly by concern. "Are you feeling well? Should you be working less? Do you need?" Fiona silenced him with a kiss. "I'm fine, perfectly healthy, and I'll continue my work for as long as it's sensible, just as I did before." "Of course," Owen agreed immediately. "I just want to make sure you're taking care of yourself along with everyone else." "I have a good teacher in that regard," Fiona said, squeezing his hand. "You've always encouraged me to follow my dreams, but you also remind me to rest when I need it." Owen brushed a strand of hair from her face, his expression tender. "That's what partners do, support each other, balance each other." From across the yard, William's excited voice called out, "Papa, Mama, look how high." They turned together to watch their son swing beneath the oak, James Caldwell's hand steady on his back, both of their faces alight with shared joy. "We've built something beautiful here," Fiona said softly. "Something I never thought possible." "We've only just begun," Owen replied, his arm tightening around her waist as they moved forward together to join their family. In the years that followed, the Quincy family continued to grow and flourish. Their second child, a daughter they named Catherine Hannah after the two strong women who had shaped their lives, arrived in the spring of 1884. A third child, Michael Owen, completed their family 3 years later. Twin Pines Ranch prospered under Owen's management, eventually becoming his own property when Mr. Henderson decided to sell. The once modest operation expanded to become one of the most successful cattle ranches in the territory, known for its progressive practices and fair treatment of workers. Fiona's medical practice evolved as well. With Dr. Hopkins's blessing and guidance, she pursued further education through correspondence courses and occasional trips to Denver for intensive training. By the time Utah achieved statehood in 1896, she was widely recognized as one of the territory's most skilled midwives and an authority on women's and children's health. Their children grew up understanding that there was no single definition of a proper man or woman, only individuals with unique gifts to offer the world. William followed in his father's footsteps, developing a talent for animal husbandry and ranch management. Catherine inherited her mother's medical interests, eventually studying formally at a time when women's admission to medical schools was becoming more accepted. Michael discovered a passion for law and justice, using his education to advocate for those whose voices were often ignored. Through it all, Owen and Fiona remained each other's strongest supporters, their love deepening with each challenge faced and overcome together. The differences that had once set Fiona apart became the foundation of their family's strength, a willingness to question convention, to value substance over appearance, and to see beauty in the unexpected. On their 25th wedding anniversary in 1904, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the community they had helped to build, Owen and Fiona stood once again before friends and family to renew the vows they had made as younger, less weathered versions of themselves. "When I found you that day by the creek," Owen said, his voice carrying clearly across the gathered crowd, "I had no idea how completely my life was about to change. I just knew I was looking at someone extraordinary, someone who refused to be limited by others' expectations." Fiona squeezed his hands, now marked by decades of hard work, but still strong and sure in hers. "And when you told me that different was beautiful to you, you gave me permission to be fully myself for the first time in my life. You didn't try to change me or fix me, you celebrated exactly who I was." "Who you are," Owen corrected gently. "The most remarkable woman I've ever known. My partner, my love, my heart." As they sealed their renewed commitment with a kiss, applause and cheers erupted around them. James Caldwell, now in his 70s and leaning on a cane, wiped a tear from his eye as he watched his daughter, the daughter he had once feared, was too different for her own good, surrounded by the rich, full life she had created on her own terms. Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, Fiona and Owen slipped away to the porch swing that had been their special place for a quarter-century. The setting sun painted the mountains in the same golden hues that had welcomed them at the beginning of their journey together. "Any regrets?" Owen asked, his arm around her shoulders just as it had been countless times before. Fiona considered the question seriously, reflecting on the path that had brought them to this moment. There had been difficulties along the way, miscarriages before Catherine was born, a terrible drought that nearly ruined the ranch, times when balancing her medical work with motherhood had seemed impossible. But through it all, they had faced each challenge side by side, their different strengths complementing each other perfectly. "Not one," she answered truthfully. "Every step, even the painful ones, led us here, and here is exactly where I want to be." Owen pressed a kiss to her temple, now threaded with silver that matched his own. Do you remember what you said to me the night I proposed, about never being a traditional wife? Fiona laughed softly. I was so worried that you would eventually wish for someone more conventional. Never, Owen said firmly. Not for a single moment. Your difference is your strength, your compassion, your brilliant mind. Those are the things I fall in love with all over again each day. Fiona leaned her head against his shoulder, contentment washing over her as they gently swayed in the gathering dusk. Different is beautiful, she murmured. The most beautiful thing in the world, Owen agreed, his voice a promise kept through 25 years and countless tomorrows still to come. As night fell over Twin Pines Ranch, stars appearing one by one in the vast Utah sky, Fiona Caldwell Quincy reflected on the long journey from the day she had ridden away from her father's house, heart heavy with rejection, to this moment of complete belonging. She had found not only acceptance, but celebration of the very qualities that had once marked her as an outsider. And in doing so, she had created a legacy that would continue long after she was gone, a family that valued individuality, a medical practice that served those often overlooked, a love story that defied convention. Different, she had learned, wasn't just beautiful. Different was essential. Different changed the world.